Hi, this is Sandra Clark, and I put together this slideshow to answer questions that people have about my artwork regarding humanity and how it was actually made. This here is an initial prototype. Of course, I had the idea for the project and went through several drawings and considerations of various materials, and this is the unit I finally came up with. It's a tessellating shape, so when you take them and alternate them horizontally and vertically, they would actually fit together like a jigsaw puzzle and not leave any open spaces. Once I completed that single unit, I really needed to get a good visual of what it would look like in space. I knew it would be an installation with many, many units, but I had to figure out exactly how many units, how they would fill the amount of space, what that would all really look like. So I went to a program that is free called Google SketchUp and put everything in to scale so that I could see how big it would be and how many units it would contain at that size. So you can see here I've got the units placed horizontally and vertically in concentric circles, and it took about 200 units to come up with this formation. The whole piece measures 8 foot high, wide, and about 5 feet deep. As I rotate in Google SketchUp, because it is a 3D modeling program, you can see that each of those circle rings is on a separate plane. So when it's viewed from the side, it makes a cone formation. After knowing how many units I would actually need to make, I was able to have a company sell and cut for me a 6-inch diameter steel pipe. I needed about 3 feet, and they sliced it into 1/4-inch sections, giving me these rings that all had 1/4-inch width walls. And here I am marking the rings, and the red marks that are at the north, south, east, west are going to be my cutting lines, and then the black marks running diagonally left to lower right are where I will drill holes. Here's a close-up of those markings. And here is my cutting jig. So the rings are each placed in the jig so that I can see the 4 red marks, and then I can go in with my angle grinder with a cutting wheel on it and cut those circles into 4 separate arches. And there you can see the cut pieces. They are being put in a different jig, and with this jig I actually need to bevel the edges, and depending on whether it's the long side or the short side once the unit is put together changes the way I need to bevel. So here you can see on the bottom piece I'm starting to bevel off that whole top corner like that. And then on the other pieces I had to take just a little bit off of those inside edges. Then I placed each of the circle pieces into a pile and stacked them, preparing them for the next step, which is drilling. So I have yet another jig, and it is supported by these clamps at the drill press, and you can see at the bottom I've got an air compressor blowing cool air on it, and I used a 1/16 inch drill bit, which is really small, but it actually got me through 400 holes through that steel by keeping it cool and drilling nice and slowly. After the holes were done, they were placed either at the top and bottom or at the sides, and I clamped these pieces to a metal base to prepare them for welding. I could get 3 at a time on my table, which sped up the process a little bit. And here you can see the welded pieces. Probably not the most beautiful welds in the world. If you're a professional welder, you'll have to forgive me. I actually learned to weld just to do this project. So here I am getting rid of all those ugly weld beads. And you can see that they needed a lot of cutting and grinding to remove them. Here you can see what it looks like once I've cut off the weld beads and smoothed that out a little bit. As you can see, I have many boxes filled with these frames. I did 212 frames. After that, I had to sand all of the surfaces smooth. The flat walls, the interior walls, and I went through a variety of various grit sanding discs to be able to get the smooth polished look that I wanted. I also needed to use a stone bit and a carbide bit on my drill press to get those interior walls that I couldn't reach with my grinder. And now I've got my final sanding is done with that 220 grit flap wheel, which really polished it and gave it a great sheen. Now that the frames were all completed and polished, it was time to turn to the springs. For this I used wire coat hanger chucked into my drill and wrapped 28 gauge wire around it using the drill to twist it on. Behind on the table you can see those are all finished springs. With those springs, I counted out the coils and cut them apart and stretched them to fit in that interior wall of the frames. Those will be used to hold the weaving that I will do, and they are glued in place with a strong super glue. Here I'm taking advantage of the holes that are used for the hanging to insert floral wire so that I can hold onto the frames while spraying the lacquer that will protect them from rusting, and it allows them to dry. Here the frames are prepped for spraying, and you can see I have a exhaust hood that I am working in and using a air sprayer to apply the lacquer. The frames were then able to dry hanging from a quilting rack with those floral wires, and after they dried I did a second application of the lacquer. Then the fun part comes, I get to weave. So as you can see, this thread is very sparkly. It's a holographic thread that is very thin. It's a plastic that is a lot like that silver Christmas tree tinsel. So I've got that threaded through a really long needle, and here I am actually threading. You can see I work half the piece going from one end to the other, just doing one direction going through the springs top and bottom. And in the close-up it's a little fuzzy, but you can see that I'm actually using my needle to weave up and down or in and out through those threads that I placed originally, so that that diamond in the center is actually completely woven. Once the frames were all done, it was time to set up the final orientation and how it would be displayed. To do that, I had to draw a 6-inch grid on my studio floor in order to arrange, and draw concentric circles on the floor so I would have guidelines. In placing the frames down, I had to be sure that the holes would line up on one of the grid lines and that the placement of the frames would be along one of the circles that I drew. Here is the whole piece laid out, and you can see it already has a lovely rainbow effect as you move around and the light hits the reflective thread in different ways. After that, I had to measure the distance between each of the frames and cut thread to be able to tie the frames together. So I used a metal seed bead to tie the knot and fed that through the hole, and that's what actually holds each of the frames together. I also use a very small fishing hook at the top, and at the top of the ceiling there is a little eye screw that hook fits right into to let the frames hang down from. So here are a couple of my very good friends and my daughter helping to prepare the wood beams to be attached to the ceiling. They are putting in the eye screws in this picture. And then there I am with one of my friends attaching those beams to the ceiling. It is finally time to actually hang the artwork. So I'm up on the ladder and my friend is handing me frames, and I am hooking those little fishing hooks into the eye screws, and you can see how they're starting to form in the back. And here is my husband handing me some of the last ones. It is almost finished. And here it is, complete and up for the very first time at the University Museum at Colorado State University. And as you can see, with close-up view, as those frames turn and the spotlights hit it, it glows in different colors. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you get a chance to come out and see the work at Art Prize at Westminster Presbyterian Church. Thank you.